I've just went through the previous week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and just sort of picked the best. I'm on the 30-minute chart and just looking at best options in my session. Um, and I'm kind of just painting the picture of like what did price do this week, and also, well, when I say pick the best options in my session, of more picked out the best trades I believe were the best options, based on like BAS and stuff like that. So the only one I'm a little bit unsure of is Mondays. Um, and I'm sort of just like following price, like what story is price telling me? And when I look at price on the 4 hour and on daily, sort of tells me a bit of a story where we're pushing up, pull back, we push up, pull back, we push up, but we then start to stall. There's 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, 4 day we put in the resistance. Fifth day we then confirm the resistance. And then we start to move down. So we're sort of moving up in the market, and then we start to change structure here. And when we start to break below this support, and that's where there is downside. So when this break below support happens on the daily, this is Monday. So if I then look at that on the 4 hour chart, it's pretty easy to see that we're moving up. And then we start to top out here, consolidate and fail to push, and then we put in, we sort of break out and form this lower low to the previous support. We then pull back, lower low again, lower high, lower low, lower high, lower low, lower high, and then we maybe start to change back to the upside potentially towards the end of the week. So in just like reading price and what kind of story is price telling me based on structure, I could potentially say, well, after the close on Monday, we have closed below the most recent support after failing to continue for 5 days, right? So that could tell me, yo, maybe we're going to be in some sort of downtrend then, which obviously is supported by the fact that that is how price forms the rest of the week, um, especially the majority of the week anyway, from Monday um to Thursday. And what I was doing was just looking at sort of my Asian ranges for the whole week, and just looking at the options that I was taking and the options that were presented themselves. And I'm kind of just thinking, well, yes, I'm trading based off of BAS, but also if I'm taking into consideration what is the price telling me, um, were those buys? Was I right to take those buys? Um, or was there maybe just better options to take based on sales? Um, and maybe what opportunities could I have maybe got involved in looking for sales? Because and this is where I was just drawing this sort of picture here, because I'm just marking up ranges. Um, on Monday the BAS was bullish, so we're looking for buys. But we can clearly see where has Asian range formed. It's formed at the top of the range on the 30-minute chart, which is also broken out of the previous hourly and 4 hour consolidation range. So I'm just looking at this from a point of view of um let me just pull this over here a sec. I've kind of fucked about with this camera on the um on the Logitech thing, and I think I fucked up the settings. To be fair, it looks all fucked. Um but yeah, what I was saying is, like, if I was to take into consideration what has actually happened in the build up to this, um you know what? I'm gonna fuck this camera up. This is in my head. You know what? I actually couldn't even care. It's so bright. Like, I'm just gonna turn the camera off. Don't know why it's not. But it's just distracting because it's like right on the other monitor. But if I understand that like we're moving up in the market and we start to top out here and then we start to change structure where it's like, prices doing this and we pull down, pull up, pull down. We then pull up and pull back down. So until this high here is validated in terms of if we get this, then that makes sense for me for upside. So I think when price closes below the structure, Phil took this trade, very good trade. I think based on that thought process of selling from the top of the range and understanding where we have broken out of, I feel like that's a viable counter trend trade. Of course the bias is bullish, but you know, looking at the bigger picture, I think I wouldn't necessarily say that that overrides the bias because we trade based on session. However, that could be an easy analysis breakdown to give you an option to take a sell. It's not, we don't get buys until price comes to the bottom of the range. Um, either here or here in this sort of like you could call it some mid-range support. And even when the support forms, it's very short-lived, the upside move, and that one candle alone, is it sufficient enough to take a buy? Maybe not. But then again, if I was say looking for sells, right? Excuse me. This could be a sell here. I could pull back and say, well, do you know what? When a target forms, you know, could sell on this. Could potentially sell on this candle as it's a breakdown. Now, I'm just looking at like, well, I understand that when we sort of do this on Monday, we are bearish, right? The sort of change in rotation to the downside until we see something like this, and then price does this and forms a higher support, a change in structure from this to this, then very much bearish. So if I go with that on the basis of um after Monday, we close bullish, or sorry, we close bearish for the day. We then lead into Tuesday, and the bias for Tuesday was mixed. Okay. And this is where we were on Tuesday. So we're sort of at the bottom of the range on Tuesday. So, of course, buys here can also make sense because it's from the bottom of the range. Could potentially look to target up into the resistance high here, or this sort of mid-range support. And it's more so just because I take into consideration the sort of change in structure to the downside. I understand that these maybe buys could potentially be short-lived because it's obviously difficult to say on on the day, but it's clearly easy to see on this that we're moving down in like we're shelves, we're stepping, we're pushing down structure, pushing down structure. So the trend is clearly down right now. Obviously, higher time frame, we're overall bullish, but um, what would give me a stronger confirmation to maybe hold longer term buys would be a change in structure above recent resistance to confirm that okay, maybe the downside is finished. But buys here on news, we can clearly see that's short lived. That resistance then confirms. If price is going to go down, where's potential targets? Previous range here from the Thursday. So I could have sold this candle. I could have maybe done something like this. And where is my target again? Let me just see. Yeah, down into this range here. There's 1-to-1, or like close to 1-to-1. That could be an option as long as my stop's above the resistance here, or I could even go above this range because realistically, until price breaks above here, it can do what it wants. It could come up as far as here. It could fuck about in here, but until this range is broken to the upside, price technically this should be still good to the downside. So on a mixed session, of course, selling here, you might say, well, where's the target? Your Asian lows here, you're targeting this, it's not really good, but we're stepping down, we're continuing. If we're feeling the break up and we're breaking down, you could look to extend targets outside. Okay, so then what do we have on Wednesday? You come to Wednesday, the bass is bearish. Happy days, the bass is in line with what we've been seeing the previous days. Our overall range, Asian high here on Mondays, then Tuesdays, Asian range is lower than Mondays, Wednesdays is lower than Tuesdays. So we're obviously moving down in the market. Selling opportunities, you know, just looking at price, lower resistance, go above the resistance or even above the range. Because again, from a if I'm looking to maybe play not like longer term trades, but intraday structure based trades, um, where's the next sort of target left if we're looking to move down? Um, Look to target down into here. You know, there's like a 1-to-1 almost, depending on where you go. But if I just be conservative and go to like the bodies, there's a 0.9 there. And then of course, like, you know, your stops can go above the range because similar to this, until we break this, we're good. So until price breaks, like, and very easy to see that this structure here is the whole way across where we break out of, pull back into, and then we start to break down. So stop loss above the actual Asian range and the structure resistance and support. I could play that and just give price the time throughout the day to potentially continue and push like that. Um, so there's an option there. Um, so this is where we come into Thursday then. Thursday, the session bass is bullish. Um, and this could potentially be seen as the first maybe change in structure. However, realistically, until this resistance here is validated, this one here, we're still very much bearish. Um, and we sort of bottom out here, sort of change structure at the bottom, and then pop to the upside. Now, this gets achieved and this gets broken, and this is where price then starts to change structure back to the upside. So from a bullish bass on the thing, obviously there's options to take trades on the break here, options to take trades on the break there. If I was a seller and I recognize that, you know what, we're bullish in the session, however, we're bearish until we break there. Could I have sold on this candle? Yeah. However, I don't like that. Because we're sort of selling a previous structure and it doesn't really make sense on that candle in my opinion. While I'm sort of comfortable with taking buys here, clear target. Um, so buys are okay there. Interesting how on Friday as well that where we come back to. So Friday's really, if I'm looking at sort of Asian range and I'm like, Asian range, Asian range is lower, Asian range is lower, Asian range is lower. There's been options to sell on every single session, regardless of bias, based on the fact that we're moving down. So if I take that same thought process to Thursday, there's options to sell. But we sort of range here and we break out. So I could have taken a breakout option here, but like I said, I didn't really like that. Below the low of that candle would at least be below this resistance, which is clearly where price reacted before it pushed up. Then what I also like as well is where these buys come from. Previous structure here, clear target achieved, and then price pushes up throughout the rest of the day, and we sort of come back down during Asian session, and we end up holding support, 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 break up, take buys above the highs, above the mid-range support, clear target up to the highs, easily achieved. The reason I'm sort of doing this as well is just to kind of see like where does price actually go, because a lot of my targets for trades in sessions is very quick. You know, I like to be in the market quick. However, actually just sitting back and going realistically, if price breaks above here, we move in this direction, where is the likely next target going to be? Um, you know, I'm very much paying attention on lower time frames to maybe say like this high, this daily support, um, mid range here, and that sort of stuff. But you can clearly see that just based on structure and actually like the movement of price, it very much does achieve the next level down or the next resistance level up. Um, and it's obviously easy in hindsight to look back and say, well, fuck, I could have just traded this to there. I could have just held that to there. I could have just traded that to there, or like here to here. And it's like, it all makes sense. Um, and I think the more I see that, the more comfortable I can get with holding trades to those likes of structured areas without paying too much attention to getting caught up with all this shit that's in the middle and stuff, you know. And especially if there is volume, you know. Um, you know, I only traded twice this week, but there was definitely options to get involved in positions, taking into consideration bias, but also taking into consideration like what has price done all week? Where are we coming from? Where are we broken down on the higher time frame? You know, using the 4 hours of daily to sort of tell that story and say, well, based on X, Y, and Z, price should potentially get to this level if we continue up. Um, and this is where um when I look back at how this week went, and I look back at, well, what could price potentially be telling me for next week? Um, well, if price was going to continue down, there's a couple of things, especially on the daily, that I could look at this as is price is moving up. We sort of topped out here. This is the most recent structure, right? We have broken that structure. We haven't put in a support yet. We've broken that support. We then break this support. And now we're in the pullback phase on the daily. So what is likely to happen next? There's a couple of things that can happen. Price could, well, it's already pulled back the previous structure. Price could have a down move, complete this daily triangle of love if we get a daily resistance, and then continue to sort of change in structure then back to the downside potentially. Right, but price is overall higher time frame bullish. So this could just be a potential pullback or um to continue bullish. Let me just make this a little bit thing, and I will just put this down here. So what could also be another play, because especially like looking at this daily range, this is a support and resistance, and where is price trading? Price is trading within this. Okay, if I just look at that on the 4 hour, the daily, I know that that could be a potential possibility. What else could be a possibility? Well, we're moving up in the market. This could be a deeper pullback. We could then hold, this is formed as support, so we could hold higher support, which you could already, you could basically say that within this daily candle price has done that, because this is pushed up. You then pull down in respect to this daily, and we have closed above the previous and broke the previous high. So you could already establish on the, especially on the 1 hour, that price has already formed higher support in here, and like, because on the way down here, it was just creating lower highs, lower lows, lower highs, lower highs. And then it wasn't until Friday we sort of changed that structure. So based on a daily, We haven't had a resistance yet, so price could potentially form a resistance, pull down and respect the previous structure to then potentially see something like this, and that would be a change in structure to the upside. Um, to the upside. So we could have that, and we could also have the exact same as that, but only we could get a continuation on Monday. Then we could get some form of daily holding support above this, right? And that could also be a play. I think another potential play here as well, which could happen, is price could then just range in here. And not really, we don't really know what it wants to do there. That could also be another potential thing. The dailies in a sort of, it's in a bit of an interesting area for me, because we're also sort of in that potential, because we have broken structure, most recent support to the downside, we haven't put in a lower resistance yet. So until the lower resistance forms, this could just keep continuing up, and it could just be seen as a deeper pullback for further upside, because we are heavily bullish. So until that, actually happens, um, I don't actually know. And I would sort of just be gauging using these daily resistance and supports as areas to watch and see, well, do we get reaction to the upside from? Um, and on the 4 hour, pretty much the same. Let me just delete these. But you can clearly see that we're forming lower lows, lower highs the whole way down here. And it's not until we put in this lower low, lower resistance, solid candle, like why aren't we continuing down and we actually break back above that? So um in my head, the structure has changed from bearish on the 4 hour back to bullish on the 4 hour, because price has validated and broken above the most recent resistance. That's why I would be back bearish then, or bullish then on the 4 hour, which does support. Just trying to get a nice color here. That's awful. Do white, which does support overall bullish higher time frame bias and higher time frame outlook. So the sort of areas I would then be paying attention to on the 4 hour are going to be this resistance here, middle, and the support. And what I'm just going to be paying attention to is, because we're above this range, can price hold support above? And do we get something like price pulling in and reacting, and this will then be the triangle? Or do we come down, push, or does price come in into this and then ban? If you're banned below, you would have to keep an eye on this, because that could potentially do this, or just wait for price to get above and take buys somewhere like where this candle closed, above the resistance, you get the upside. So that's the areas I'm going to be paying attention to on the 4 hour, specifically this, because it's the most recent. Can already see that once we closed above, we have pulled back and tapped into it. But we're sort of creating like some form of consolidation. Um, a good sign for me leading into the session would be, given this is now the most recent range per se on the 30, you know, I would just mark this up, for example, like this. The support really doesn't matter. I'm more paying attention to the resistance. And, you know, if the session bias is say mixed or bullish, or even bearish, if Asian range is anywhere within here and price is at the top of the range and it's forming something like that, and we get the breakout, that could be a potential option to take the breakout of that range and sort of be above the 4 hour resistance and target this hand to continue, because there is every chance that we could come to the session on Monday and we're up there, you know, and that would be clear indication that we're sort of back in that bullish trend on the 4 hour and the 1 hour. We've sort of changed the structure back to the upside. So buys would be making more sense from intraday to longer term ideas, buy pullbacks to previous structure and that sort of stuff. Um, so that's the sort of main areas I'm going to pay attention to on the 4 hour. Of course, where this resistance is formed is this previous structure here. So to me, this structure is going to be very important as well. And the reason is because if price is trading in here, we're then going to be trading within this structure. And this can be then seen as like a mid-range. So you might say that most sensible buys are going to come from the bottom of the range, but pay attention to this. Look to target the top of the range, or because I know that this mid-range level is here, I could just wait for buys above this. You know, does price come up and hit this, and then we start the range here, come back below, and then come back above? That would be a good indication for me to potentially take buys up into the top of this. And of course, just looking at structure, it's very easy to see that, well, where is the next resistance? Above here, where's the next resistance? Here. That's going to be target, right? Um, but of course, because we are trading within the daily range, you could argue that a daily close outside of this would be a stronger indication of further upside, and taking buys in the session or buys throughout the day in line with that thought process could be getting involved in buys to build the daily candle, something like that potentially. I don't even know where this will end, but a bullish daily candle getting involved in buys above here to look to play that. Um, so they're the sort of areas I'm going to be paying attention to on the daily and on the 4 hour specifically. In my opinion, I don't really need to pay much attention to this and this, which is the same, just on different time frames, because I have this, right? I'm just going to mark up the daily support for the sake just to see where that actually lands. You've got the daily support there. Looking at that on the 4 hour, yeah, it's basically bang on that mid-range, you know. So sort of near enough the same area, give or take 10 pips, 11 pips or something. So I don't really need to pay much attention to that because I've sort of got that level there. This is most recent price action. This is irrelevant to an extent. So I'm just focusing on this. Validation, change in structure. Can we hold above? Do we push from here? Do we push from here? Do we pull back in? Push from here? Do we pull back in? Push from above here? Where buys made sense from on this candle. But the overall idea from a 4 hour and from a daily triangle is this is the overall target up here. there's obviously stepping stones on the way, which is these resistances, because this essentially is the whole down move. This is now the start of the up move. It's just how do we get to there and potentially further? Do we just keep going up, or do we have the sort of stepping stones where we do this, like we did on the way down? But that's going to be overall sort of what I'm looking for this week. And the fact that price, when I look at what happened last week when we started to break structure to the downside, made sense to take sales in line with that. Especially the fact that the Asian ranges each day were below one another, and it also showed that sales, you could have just hopped in any point really and took a sell, in line with structure, you know. So is that going to be the exact same on the way up? So I'm looking at this and then going to say, well, where does this come to? And this is going to be structure then. So I could take buys from here. I could even go stops as far as here, stops below here, and look to give that room to breathe to the upside. And then of course, does price hold support above here? So I'm sort of going to be looking at next week. I'm going to be paying a lot of attention to these sort of structure points, and potentially maybe playing a bit of a higher time frame idea, and giving price room to breathe, and potentially playing like a stop. Um, just say we're a mixed bass and we come down and push, I could potentially get something like that. Give that a big stop and look to potentially play the overall idea over maybe a couple of days or a day, or just let price do its thing. Um, and it could just manage it the exact same way as it would to the downside. But look to see if I can play that idea, and put a bit of trust in those sort of range plays, and don't get so caught up in the moment, with potentially closing early and that sort of stuff. I sort of think back to how I traded last week in my position for the week. I don't think there was anything wrong with how I traded last week, and I feel like if I was in a better position, especially Friday's trade, I could let that one extend a little bit and run. But it was all down to my position for the week. So something like this, higher time frame trade or a bit of a play, could maybe be dependent on how am I doing for the week. I could maybe take something like that at the start of the week and let it run for a bit, or try and bank up a little bit, and then maybe if one of these ideas come to play or structure lines up nicely for something like that, maybe towards the end of the week, that could be also an option. But that's sort of what I'm paying attention to for an outlook, essentially until, because again, we have broken structure and price hasn't put in a lower resistance yet. So this could also do that. And if I'm looking at that from a 4 hour, what would I have to see? Well, first and foremost, what would I have to see is if a very early indication of that would be this resistance to be breached and price to close below, price to come back either to the most recent structure point or come back maybe to the previous, and then fail to break above and out and start to put in lower resistances either there, and I could look to play the exact same idea as I did as Phil did here, and look to play that range, play this range, or if we get the lower resistances here, that is going to be the option to potentially play this. Oh, don't know what happened there. That or that from there, in a sense that we do this, break below, down into here, targets, targets. If you're playing a higher time frame thought process of if this is forming during the day, this could maybe be the building of the resistance forming to have a daily candle, looking like that, right? So that's also downside thought process because essentially, yes, we've changed structure on the 1 hour and the 4 hour to the upside, but if a daily resistance is formed, that would confirm the sort of lower resistance on the daily from the breakdown from the top. And until that resistance forms, price still could just keep continuing up like that, and we never get a resistance. It's just a deeper pullback to do that. So we're sort of right here at the minute where we've got two bullish dailies, and I don't know if it's downside, and I also don't know if it's upside because we have broken structure. So it's like more development is needed in price to kind of confirm to me actually, well, what direction do you want to go here? So that's what I'm going to be paying attention to. Um, so I just feel like reflecting back on last week, there was multiple options to take trades based on line with what price was actually telling me, which was we're breaking down to the downside. Of course, because we're higher time frame bullish, I don't specifically know how long that's going to last. Because any sort of short downside could be short term because price is bullish higher time frame. And we have been bullish for months and months and months and months. But I think just maybe having that zoomed out approach and actually look and see, well, we're changing structure to downside, you know, take advantage of that and sell in line with that if options appear, until price tells you otherwise. And it seems like on Friday prices potentially told me otherwise. But also this could just be a deeper pullback, further downside, which would be confirmed with failure to continue and breakdown and daily resistances and those being respected. So that's sort of what I'm looking at going into this week. Um, just thinking as well, looking back on the week. So bullish buys, not so comfortable. Mixed session buys on the breakouts, comfortable enough basis structure. Sales make sense with the overall breakdown, but not really as clean. Wednesday, sales make sense on the breakdown of price. Thursday, buys make sense. On the basis of a bullish bias, and you can use mid-range levels to buy on breakouts. This is a nice indication of if I had an idea of I am a seller and we are doing this, and I'm like, when we get to here after seeing this resistance and this confirmation of resistance, I'm like, why aren't we down here then? The fact that for an extra hour, price fucks around, starts to break up, is a good indication to take buys to a target. And then, of course, where do we pull back to on Friday morning? We pull back to previous structure. And then buys are like lift off. That's good. So, that zoomed out approach. Just read what the story of what price is doing. I'm going to kind of do that. Keep that in the back of my mind along with my session bias and just kind of ask myself that question of actually, realistically what makes sense here, you know. Um, Sometimes I often find that I can be so zoomed in on price like this, looking at this and going, well, if here makes sense, right? Then of course just taking that zoomed out approach and saying, where's price looking to go? Where realistically could it get to if we get a push to the upside? And that can sometimes, help with holding positions, and playing those ranges. But I really do like the idea of the fact that we have pulled up to here and reacted, and we're starting to consolidate. So if we get closures inside here after failure to break down, below this point. I do really like the idea of taking buys in here. And looking to play this range. How does that look like on the 4 hour? Yeah, I like that. So that's probably one of the things I'll be looking forward to next week to see if we do get something like that there. Um, and I can even just use a bit of a wider stop as well if I'm going to play that idea. But yeah, that'll do it for me really.